The claim that she, as someone who barely even qualifies as brown, was teased on a daily basis her entire childhood because of her brownness is just impossible to believe. If it was true, I would say it's not the worst thing in the world.
But even if it did, Matt Walsh is just straight up like, but that would be a good thing. I'm not saying that she experienced racism, but if she did, that's good. It's better she experienced racism than something else, you know, that she could have been made fun of. Yeah, they could have called her ugly, you know, that could have happened. Yeah, so yeah, racism good. It's interesting. Nikki Haley, who's basically, and while she doesn't really have a mathematical chance, is the last potential challenge to Donald Trump's presidential primary, has come out and said that America is not racist. I guess racism was eradicated in America, no longer a racist country. Yeah, a lot of people apparently are not satisfied enough with that answer, including white supremacist Matt Walsh, who went on to say some really racist shit. Like, even if you happen to be trying your best to make it inside the Republican Party, and you do have to deal with a lot of old-timey bigotry, right? And again, this is going to be an intersection of vectors here. We have a lot of sexism that is present within the Christian nationalists and the GOP. I mean, they do want to they want to revert back to an old biblical sense of what a man and a woman and their roles in society should be. One, of course, is the human cleaner and birth haver, those two things, and then the other is the man. And so that's basically the dynamic that the Christians are trying to put into place, and women shouldn't have control or autonomy over their own bodies or their own reproductive systems, because ultimately they could use them for witchcraft, which would not be great. So that's basically the dynamic they're trying to set up. And so even if you are trying to climb the ranks within, you know, a very bigoted demographic and definitely media ecosystem, more so than anything else, you're still going to have individuals like Matt Walsh, who, even if you are saying, well, America's not racist, then they're going to be like, oh, touche, eh? Well, I'll show you racism. I'll show you racism right here. I'll be more racist than you can possibly imagine. I'll assume my ultimate racist form.
Okay, let's just slow down here and take this one at a time.
Media Matters, your video playback is lacking. It leaves a lot to be desired. I often complain about this.
Okay, let's just slow. That's a
like when I adjust it, it shouldn't mute. All right, it's gonna be quiet.
Okay, let's just slow down here and take this one at a time. First of all, just to address the elephant in the room here, Nikki Haley is not really brown, or at least if she is brown, she's a very light shade of it. But technically, we're all shades of brown from a color spectrum perspective.
I'm sorry. When people say people of color, did you think of this in terms of crayons? Did you think that that's what it's referencing? Just like literal colors? Yes. And then if someone is not shades of, well, whiteness is purity. How much whiteness one has. So when you have the white crayon and you use it on the other the colors that change.
Seeing a literal white person, like there are no people with skin pigment the same shade as a sheet of computer paper. So if Nikki Haley's brown.
I was doing a bit. Sorry, so that is what Matt Walsh believes. I guess that's his understanding of basically racial hierarchies and racism.
She's only brown in the sense that any white person is brown. I'm not doubting that Haley's family is really from India. They are. But the point is that if she doesn't tell you she's brown, you would never know. In fact,
so this is pretty wild because Nikki Haley has actually intentionally changed her name. Now, you can say that she's changed her name for a number of reasons. There's a lot of people who have done so. For example, Nicolas Cage, his actual real legal name is not Nicolas Cage, it's Nicola Coppola. But he did not, sorry, Nicholas Coppola, but he didn't want to be associated with the legacy of the Coppolas and their, you know, contributions to film and cinema. He wanted to make it on his own. And also he thought it would, I guess, be a little better to have Nicolas Cage be the name in terms of how he presents himself to the general public and how they refer to him. And something similar has happened with Nikki Haley. You could also say that Nikki Haley probably would have done so in many ways in order to be more electable, because there is a, let's just say, a bias towards people of color in the United States. If they have names that aren't considered, you know, Tom, Jane, Michael, Julian. I was like, I'm running out of white names here. Then people might be a little bit scared of it. For example, for Vivek Ramaswamy in his campaign, there was actual polling and people who were done in exit polls who said that they thought he sounded a little bit too much like a terrorist, like a 9/11 hijacker. Because again, it's like, well, I don't know. Is he a Muslim? Well, he's not actually. He's not a Muslim. But the name is different to me and scary. And so for that reason, and many others, many people have pointed out that, like, America's still racist. It's still racist as fuck, actually. I mean, it's kind of just, it was founded as a racist colonial project and has continued to be racist. And the thing is, it's not a bad thing to talk about this or point it out. It's not even a bad thing when people acknowledge that it's true, because it's just, you're just acknowledging reality, right? That people are treated differently for artificial constructs that we made up. We're all the same. We're all humans. We're all humans, but then people can be treated differently. Like, you might not have as easy a time renting property if you are visibly indigenous. Like, people might not want to rent you property because they feel that you're going to perhaps drink too much, or you won't be able to maintain a steady job, or maybe you're going to have parties, or maybe you're going to cook like crystal meth. I don't know what it is, but I want to refuse you the right to rent property because of these reasons, these biases that I have, and whether or not they're going to turn out to be true is completely irrelevant to this. It's just basically this is what people have programmed, and a lot of this is, it's fine acknowledging it.
Most people, I didn't find out until this election.
I remember the discourse over the Hispanic Nazi mass shooter. He wasn't white enough to be a Nazi. Yeah, like, again, if you see the world in Matt Walsh, right? If you understand, like, racism to simply literally be colors, like, if he thinks people of color, when someone says that, it's like, well, so you mean like colors other than white? Because, like, I'm more of a peach. I was like, yeah, I'm not literally as white as a sheet of paper, all right? I wouldn't white balance a camera shot with my skin, despite the fact that I am pretty fucking white. But I'm just saying, like, there's this is a concept that goes a little bit deeper than simply that.
Cycle that Haley is Indian. And when I found out, like most people, I said, what? Nikki Haley isn't white? And I had to go check Wikipedia. And sure enough, like, oh, her family's from India. I had no idea.
Right. And why would it be that maybe people who want to be elected, especially in countries that still harbor racism, would not want that to be public knowledge? Why isn't it part of her campaign? Why doesn't she state that at the start? Why doesn't she talk about how she's a proud immigrant? Why doesn't she talk about how she's a proud child of immigrants? Why doesn't she talk about how, you know, if it wasn't for immigration, this country would not be possible? How every single person in America, unless they're indigenous, is technically either an immigrant or was brought over, their ancestors were brought over as slaves to the country. Like, why not bring up those points? Because they will never, ever be successful, especially in a right-wing base. It's difficult enough to try and, you know, talk about those realities even amongst the Democratic Party, again, because of how racist both society and we all are. So this is the thing. Then how in the world is someone like Nikki Haley, in Matt Walsh's eyes, was white, and then he's found out, he's like, oh, Wikipedia this, and apparently it's not true.
All that to say, her stories of anti-Brown persecution strain credulity from the start.
So obviously, I guess after doing Wikipedia and learning that Nikki Haley was not white, Matt Walsh immediately began to treat her as if she was not white and bring up the fact like, oh, well, maybe she's been lying about these parts of her that I don't like, these aspects of Nikki Haley that I don't enjoy.
And what are the stories? Well, she says that she was disqualified from a beauty pageant for being brown. We're supposed to believe that way, way back in the ancient times of the 1980s, South Carolina's beauty pageant circuit had never encountered anyone who hailed from Asia or anywhere in the Middle East or anywhere in South or Central America.
Wait, I'm sorry. We're supposed to believe that 1980s South Carolina was not racist? That's what the you know, the disbelief, the suspension has to be in the other direction. Like,
so they saw Nikki's slightly brownish skin and their minds were blown. They didn't know what to do. Like, they looked at her and they said, wait a minute. I've heard of black people, I've heard of white people, but what is this? They make people in this color? What do we do here? They, like, you know, hit a button, set off an alarm. It was a total panic. It was pandemonium. This is what the beauty pageant official apparently said to Nikki sometime in the early 1980s. I must confess that I find that somewhat difficult.
What is he even saying? I don't know. Like, again, I think he's just trying to ramp up the old racism right now. And it's just in the midst of being like, hey, by the way, this is pretty intense. Matt Walsh didn't know that Nikki Haley was, in fact, not white. And after finding that out, he found out things about Nikki Haley's career, including, yes, a true story that Nikki Haley has come forward to talk about. One that she doesn't mention as much anymore because, yes, trying to become the president of the United States, you have to do this entire, like, well, the U.S. is complicated for sure, and there has obviously been a lot of complicated history that we're not here to downplay or discount. But you know, we are no longer racist, and we have overcome this. Like that's what you get from the Democrats. On the right now, you just got to be like, no, not true, never happened, no such thing.
Difficult to believe. In fact, it sounds very similar to the single woman who informs you that men aren't interested in her because they are intimidated by her staggering beauty. It sounds like the most desperate cope of all time.
Whoa, what? Like this is just hey, when I was a kid, I experienced racism as a brown girl in America. That's all the story. He's like, yeah, it sounds like cope of the highest order, you know, like the hot chicks and turn you down.
I mean, there are, after all, other more obvious reasons why men...
And again, pretty wild that, like, in the midst of having to say publicly, oh, yes, America is not racist, well, the members of your own party who would be voting for you, pundits, the pundit class, the right-wing pundit class, goes and does a pretty extreme racism, you know? Goes and like, well, yeah, that never happened. You lied.
May not be interested in you. Just as there are other more obvious reasons why you might have been disqualified from a beauty pageant. But I guess we'll never know. I mean, it is possible that beauty pageants in South Carolina 40 years ago had a policy that only people from Africa, Europe, or North America were allowed to participate. It's possible that black and white people were teaming up together to discriminate against Asians. That's a team we don't see very often. Like that's a you know, an assortment, a team we don't see very often. I wasn't there. I can't say for sure. What I can say for sure, though, is that there is simply no way Nikki Haley was teased every day for being brown, as she claims. I've never heard anyone being teased for being brown ever in my...
You're literally a white supremacist. The guy judges diaper wrestling with Nazis. Like, dudes have swastikas on their bodies. They're not only like, they're racist, okay? But there's different degrees of racism. And there's people who take and love and treat their racism so preciously. Like, they really believe in a hierarchy of races and racial superiority that they're willing to get a swastika tattooed on their fucking skin. That's the motherfuckers that Matt Walsh would hang out with and do book burnings of the Quran and stuff like that, and get them greased up in fucking diapers and judge them as they wrestled each other. That's him. So yeah, I imagine Matt Walsh hasn't had too much experience with this.
Entire life. I'm sure it's happened at various points in American history, but the claim that she, as someone who barely even qualifies as brown, was teased on a daily basis her entire childhood because of her brownness is just impossible to believe. If it was true, I would say it's not the worst thing in the world. She
always ramps it up, eh? Just like, all right, and so at this moment, considering that, again, this would be a colleague, this is, again, someone who he is on the same political ideology, like, wants to donate to the Republican Party, support Donald Trump ultimately once Donald Trump wins the nomination. They're all on the same side. These are Republicans. This is Republican versus Republican. But to him to be like, well, okay, there's no way in the world that, you know, someone who grew up in America who is brown experienced racism. That's just completely made up. This is a made up fact. Never happened. But if it did happen, probably a good thing. You know, just going to add this second part here. And just in case it is true, all right, if she isn't lying about that whole thing, if it is true, well, then, yeah, that's good because racism's good. So you get that.
Like, every kid is going to be teased for something. And if they choose your maybe very slightly darker skin tone as the subject of ridicule, that's not too terrible, all things considered. I mean, it's better than being called ugly or fat or a loser or whatever. Every kid gets picked on by some.
It's not too bad if kids are racist, if kids are picking on other kids specifically for the color of their skin, because there's other things they could be making fun of. They could be calling you a loser. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we understand what children are taught at the Matt Walsh household. Yeah, I mean, the good news here is that all of the children are allegedly homeschooled. None of them interact with other kids. So you're not seeing a whole bunch of, like, you know, hardcore racists just running around looking to pick on other kids because they're racist. Because they're like, well, daddy says this is the one acceptable one. This is the good kind of discrimination. That's what daddy says on his show.
One for something. It's an unfortunate reality of growing up, especially in the school system. And
And by the way, it's really telling what he compared, you know, someone being a person of color to, right? It's like, so if you happen to not be white, well, I mean, there's a lot of other things that are also bad that I could make fun of you for. You know, if you're like an ugly loser, yeah, that's the same thing.
None of it should be happening. No one should be getting teased because they have brown skin, if that's even happening. I don't even know what that would sound like. But of all the things you could be teased for, I'm not sure why that would be any worse than any of the other horrible things that kids are said and say to each other. But that's assuming that this really happened, which it probably didn't. At least.
But even if it did, Matt Walsh is just straight up like, but that would be a good thing. I'm not saying that she experienced racism, but if she did, that's good. It's better she experienced racism than something else, you know, that she could have been made fun of. Yeah, they could have called her ugly, you know, that could have happened. Yeah. So yeah, racism good. Damn, Matt.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Can you please hit the like and subscribe button and maybe leave a comment? It really does help the videos out. But first, the people who produce everything you see before you and make this entire channel possible: Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Puppy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demel, Trevbot.exe, Words Greenwood, and Travis McClinton. And also, thank you to every other person who helps fund this show. Their names are on the screen right now. It would not be possible without every single one of them. We cannot thank you enough. And if you want to join the Patreon, please come to patreon.com/theserfs and help us exist.